Hello, myGroundForce customers and friends. Tim Goff here, your host of the Taking Care of Business podcast. We're very excited about the things that we're doing in this podcast series, where we bring to the service provider ecosystem and the trucking market at large some very specific ways to improve your company's performance at the lowest possible cost. You know, most trucking companies need big company systems, but they can't afford to have them. So what we try to do is bring you world-class solutions at a fractional rate. And when you add all those together, hey, you have a world-class infrastructure. Today, we're talking to Kevin McClain. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, Tim.
Kevin is the owner of READI Response. READI Response is a great solution that I am so excited is now a myGroundForce Fusion partner. Remember, at myGroundForce, we have the world-class technology, and we combine that with what we call fusion services. Fusion services are where we take technology-adept humans and integrate their expertise with our software. And Kevin has an amazing solution we're going to talk about today. Kevin, welcome, and tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. Thanks, Tim. Really appreciate it. So my name is Kevin McClain, and I've been a legal investigator for 31 years now, and been involved in doing a lot of risk management solutions and also litigation investigations during that time. So,
and an expert witness.
Wow. Yes, indeed. So, kind of wore a lot of different hats. And as far as with READI Response, this kind of came together, Tim, from actually a case I investigated, which when I tell you the facts of it, it's going to mirror this case out of Texas known as the Werner case that kind of started the nuclear verdicts, right? So my case was based out of Illinois, and it was snowing, sleeting, and we get a call from an attorney out of Chicago. He was desperate. My client needs help. They just had this major crash. The facts are pretty basic. Driver is coming down the Interstate 57 coming southbound. Our truck is going northbound. Guy hits black ice, comes sliding all the way over. Boom, nails him. Kind of sounds similar to what we heard in the case down in Texas.
Yep.
So what did we do? We immediately got out there. Now, normally this trip would have took us about 20 minutes. It took us about 2 hours. But what was so important about rapidly responding out there, when we got to the scene, the state trooper still was at the scene. So we was able to identify a lot of information. Some of that information never even made it into the police reports because he didn't want the family to know that this particular individual actually had drugs on him at the time. Oh. Okay. So then we were able to go over and track down the unit, the semi-unit. I'd already called a friend of mine who's an accident reconstructionist. He couldn't come down because of the weather. He explained to me how I had to basically get everything off there, do the download, and was able to do the download. Within a matter of about 2 days' time, we get a response back on this entire case. 2 days, we get a response back. There's no fault whatsoever from the driver's position. The company was ecstatic. The attorney said, "You made me look like a rock star." And hence, READI Response was born on that day.
Yeah,
and
wow.
I was just like, okay.
Well, you just said something I've never heard of. I just shows my ignorance, but accident reconstructionist. Most accidents are relatively straightforward, but not all of them. So having access to that kind of skill set is really awesome.
Absolutely. And like I say, my accident reconstructionist I would normally use, he couldn't make it down there. The weather was horrible. So he kind of walked me through the process of what I needed to do the download. And I had to take it to a Kenworth dealership over in St. Louis to do, to basically finish the download of it. And
but just knowing you need to do that is a skill set in and of itself that oftentimes, our small trucking companies, we don't really think about that, right? So I've been through unfortunately, a lot of accidents when I was a line haul contractor, and the words accident reconstructionist never crossed my mind. But I understand how to investigate accidents given my Navy safety background, so that was a little bit different, but I didn't use those words. Tell us some more about the whole concept and all the elements of READI Response.
Sure. Well, like I say, after that particular incident happened, I'd gone to some other training, some marketing conferences, and I ran into a company that was doing an app. Well, at that time when people were doing apps, I always thought they were just for games. But then when I saw where they're able to take pictures, submit them in, and get an insurance quote back like rapidly, I thought, wow, maybe there's a way we could incorporate this into professional investigators. Because when we would get calls on cases, it would usually be anywhere from 2 months to 2 years later when we would have to start responding. Now, we're already now behind everything else. We're trying to track down witnesses that have disappeared, evidence that's disappeared. The scene of the crash is gone. The vehicles are probably gone, especially if it's a bad fatality type of case or bodily injuries. So it's like, if we could speed up that whole process. In other words, what if we could take, highly skilled, highly trained professional investigators that understand, boots on the ground, understand how to track down information, and incorporate that with 21st century technology, where literally the clients would be able to tap the app and it would alert an investigator within a certain radius to be able to rapidly respond out there to start gathering the facts. That's where READI Response was basically born from.
Well, talk to us about the advantage of a trucking company that is unfortunate in a position that their driver wrecked a truck. But what's the advantage in the life cycle, given your experience as an accident investigator, having been in the courtroom, having been an expert witness in various types of cases? What's the advantage of having this professional investigator on scene versus a situation where the small trucking company doesn't do anything but the police report?
And this is based upon, this case scenarios I've been involved in. And one of the biggest areas that I see, because we always think about traffic crashes as being really serious bodily injuries or fatalities, but one of the hidden areas that everybody ignores is the fender benders. Those fender benders, I've had more investigations on fender benders that turn into $2 or $3 million claims. And what happens? No one had come out there. No one had documented any information. No one got any information about witnesses. No one took pictures of the scene or alleged injuries or damage to the vehicles or anything like that. That's why it's so imperative, whether it's a fender bender or if it's a serious bodily crash, to get out there while the scene is fresh, while witnesses are still around the area, where you can get documentation and find all the information that you need. Actually, Tim, there was a NHTSA study, and NHTSA stands for National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. They did their own study on this, saying, what happens if people rapidly respond out to an accident? What value is that? Is that increase the value as far as the knowledge that people get to be able to help resolve these claims? And guess what? It said, if you get out there in a rapid manner, the value of getting that information and getting accurate information increases like exponentially. So it was like not just me believing that, but even the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration did a test to also prove that.
Wow. I think that you just said something that most service providers, most small trucking companies would have the opposite view on fender benders. Or be like, no harm, no foul, keep it moving. But really, anytime you have an incident with one of your trucks, it needs to be properly investigated. Now, if you hit the concrete pole in the yard, maybe not. But if there's outside the yard, anything needs to be investigated, because in particular in the FedEx market space, in that ecosystem, you've got a Fortune 50 company's brand name on the side of your truck. And so they're going after that, right? And so I think it's really important for us to kind of change how we think about these incidents that occur in our company, because we have to be much more professional than we probably have been in our past as small trucking companies. We have a contract with a Fortune 50 company if you're in the FedEx ecosystem, and you are expected to behave like a Fortune 50 company. And therefore, you need to bring all these services to the table that a Fortune 50 company would have, but you can't afford to do it, right? And so this is why it's so important that we have guys like you that are out there offering some services, honestly, that I'd never heard of before. So I'm really excited that we're having this conversation. So kind of take us through the life cycle of what you see. So we have, we just had an accident. And a myGroundForce customer has decided to use the fusion service from READI Response. Kind of tell us in detail what goes on when that happens.
Certainly. So as soon as that were to happen, that accident, and either that driver or the safety manager is able to alert us just by a tap of the app, we're getting what they call the latitude and the longitude. That means exactly where that crash happened at. We're getting that information. Now, what's important about that is we start what's called the rapid remote investigation. That's the first part of what we're going to do. This day and age, we're all citizen journalists. We all have cell phones. Yeah. We all have smartphones. What are we doing with them? We're taking pictures. We're documenting things like that. So one of the first things we will do is we'll put what they call a geofence, is what they call it, where we're looking within a certain radius of where that crash happened for posts, for comments, for tweets, for YouTube videos.
So let me ask a question. So essentially what you're doing in your technology is you're using AI, artificial intelligence. And what I say all the time, there's many different types of artificial intelligence. Most of our customers' interaction with AI is they go on Google and put something in, and the AI goes and searches the internet and gives them an answer. But that's not what this is. This is a really advanced algorithm that goes and searches all the social media platforms for any type of post that might have been related to this accident that my customer just had. Is that what you're saying?
That is correct.
Wow. And
yes.
Why would we do that?
Well, first of all, that person just took a picture, right? That's evidence. That is evidence. That picture is evidence. That individual who took that picture will identify who it was. In other words, they may have a username. So then what we'll do is we'll do our investigative research, identify that person. It could be like, Tim, let's just take a hypothetical that we have a crash out here on Interstate 24, and someone is getting ready to fly back to Denver. Okay. And they just want to go ahead and post something about it. They took a picture and they post about it. And next thing you know, they're flying back. Well, if it's a crash we're involved in, we identify, now we know who this person is. By the time they land in Denver and get back to their apartment, their house, we could have an investigator knocking on their door saying, we want to talk to you about what you saw this morning in Nashville, Tennessee.
That's crazy.
That's
so not only has this person, I never thought about it that way. He took a picture. That's evidence. That's a legal term. Right now we have a potential piece of legal evidence if the case goes that way, if the incident becomes a case, and an investigator goes and talks to the person that actually took the picture.
Yes.
Wow.
That's boots on the ground. That's rapidly responding to a crash. That is sincerely changing the entire narrative because, like I said, usually when we get cases, it's 2 months to 2 years later. We have sped up that entire process. Now, and we've not even got onto the scene yet. Keep this in mind. We've not got to the scene yet. We've already gotten information. We're already building information. Witnesses were identified that probably nobody even knows about right now.
So this is more than just Kevin showing up at the scene. Right?
That's absolutely right. Because a lot of times we're going to be shut down from getting into the scene for a while.
Yeah.
But because of the various tools that we can use in our investigative approach, we can still find witnesses. We can still get that case started.
We're already investigating, and there's no investigator there yet.
Yes.
Using AI.
As soon as that crash happens, we get that latitude and longitude, we can immediately start an investigation.
That's incredible. Okay, so you talked about pressing the button, and that generates this geofence and triggers the AI routines. What else happens after I press the button?
Yeah, if you've ever used Uber before, just imagine Uber for investigators. That's a good way of describing it. So once that button is tapped, okay, it's going to send out to a certain radius for an investigator to respond. In other words, they would accept the assignment, and then they're going to start coming towards the location. Now, our technology will show in real time, they just accepted it, they're on their way, so that driver will know someone's on the way. That safety manager will know somebody's on the way. Everybody's going to be able to see in real time what is going on.
Now, this is nationwide?
Yes.
What is your typical response time, you think?
Normally, we try to keep it within like a 2-hour window.
It's crazy. So as a small business owner in the FedEx ecosystem, if one of my guys has an accident, I can press the green button. That's like what I say. I don't know what color your button is, but in my world, the green button means money, right? So we press the green button and things start to happen. So we've triggered this AI investigation of social media and other platforms, and we've dispatched a professional accident investigator that's going to be there within 2 hours nationwide. Now, in the middle of the Oklahoma desert, that might not happen. I understand that. But in general, that's going to happen. What else is happening when I push this button?
After the investigator has accepted the assignment and he is now on his way, he'll actually have a picture of the driver. So he'll know who the driver is he needs to go see. The driver will have a picture of the investigator. Right. So he knows who to talk to, more importantly, who not to talk to, right? And then when the investigator gets on scene, he's able then to create basically what we call a triage report right from the scene, taking his photographs, going through the checklist. We have a checklist embedded into the app to make sure we cover everything we need to cover on there. He creates the entire report right from the scene, can submit it from the scene. So now the decision makers, the safety manager, whoever else is involved in the company can make next step decisions. Do we need to get an accident reconstructionist out there? Do we need to get possibly even a public relations person out there because of the horrendous crash that it was? And we need to have, somebody on our side for public relations to be able to speak to the news or whatever.
Now, those might be the kind of options that a big company has, but a small company is not going to be worried about those things. What should a small company, for years I didn't have a safety manager. It was just me. So when your guys contact the owner as the point of contact in this case, are you suggesting certain courses of action that they might want to consider?
Yes, and on top of that also, we have a nationwide network of rapidly responded defense firms. It's called the Themis Advocacy Group. And this is a nationwide network of independent private defense firms that specialize in rapidly responding to truck crashes. This is their specialty.
So what you're telling me is that as a myGroundForce customer that's also taking the Fusion Service READI Response, when they press the button, all these things happen and an attorney is immediately assigned?
Yes.
Wow. What happens with this attorney?
The attorney will respond and will go to the scene. He'll also advise the client, this is very important. He needs to advise that client about, we're representing you. It's called the attorney-client privilege, which then protects that company. And every company needs to understand this, and most don't. So
does the attorney call the driver right then and say anything, or does he just call the owner of the company? Who is this attorney getting in contact with?
The main would be probably the driver, if at all possible, unless the driver is incapacitated.
Unless he's hurt, you're going to tell him, shut up.
Yes.
Everything you do is under attorney-client privilege.
Yes.
Wow.
That is extremely important, and that is what has been missed in our industry across the board, and that's why
it's missed all the time in the FedEx ecosystem.
Yeah, most people wouldn't even know who to call.
No,
they'd have no idea. They might go through, on the internet or something like that. Well, who's an attorney that can represent us or something like that? You got to have somebody that's a professional that understands litigation.
He's going to be there in a couple hours.
Yes,
but he's already going to have called the driver and said, "Shut the heck up."
He's already going to be advising things right there as soon as he gets involved in it.
Wow.
Yes.
Now, this is how a big company would respond to one of these incidents, but they would do it with their own people.
Right.
What you've put together is the opportunity for a small trucking company or a larger trucking company to get the same kind of expertise that a humongous trucking company might have, but at a much lower cost on a per incident type of event. So, wow, when I push this button, I'm going to dispatch an attorney. I'm going to dispatch a professional accident investigator. This attorney is going to advise my driver to shut the heck up, and this is how I want you to proceed. And we're going to be doing an AI search for all sorts of platforms looking for evidence and witnesses.
That's correct.
Wow. And so take us on down the line here a little bit. So this is, the first 2 hours. Take us beyond that.
But wait, there's still more.
Oh, wait.
So as anybody knows, in the trucking space, Department of Transportation has a mandate that if you're involved in basically a you have a moving violation, or you have a tow away of your vehicle, or you're involved in a serious injury type of thing, you're required to have what they call a post-accident drug test done.
Oh, yeah, it's true. It's true in the FedEx space too.
And so we've got a nationwide network. It's approximately now around 1,000 certified drug collectors and phlebotomists that can rapidly respond to the location to do that drug test, because you've only got 8 hours to get it done. And if you don't, what happens? That driver gets fined, that company gets fined, and more than likely their premiums are going to go through the roof because of that.
Wow.
So we've got that covered.
Note here, if you don't have that in your safety manual, you need to put it in there. Any incident requires a drug test. If he bumps the concrete pole in the yard, he needs to go get a drug test. If he has a fender bender, drug test. If he has a major crash, obviously drug test. You have to have that in your safety manual to protect you, okay? And then you just heard Kevin say you have to do it in 8 hours, which means that that driver can't come back tomorrow and do it. And you need to have a policy and a procedure inside your company on how you immediately respond to meet this requirement to get a drug test done. And so now when I push this button, I'm dispatching a drug tester. What I find is the only way to get a drug test done in some of these rural parts of the country in the middle of the night when most of these accidents occur is to go to the hospital. So then you go to the hospital and you get in the queue, and then you got to tell them you need a DOT test. They don't always know what that is, and I don't know, it's painful. And then you're trying to get the results back, and this kind of makes the drug report become the drug test report becomes a part of the evidence that was collected, and it's all under attorney-client privilege since you talked to an attorney from the jump.
That's correct.
Wow.
That's correct.
Wow.
And once again,
this is true big company stuff, Kevin.
With the READI Collect, that's what it's called, that our goal was to have about a 2-hour window for a collector to be able to respond, to the scene if need be. Wherever that driver's at that they need to get done, we can get a certified drug collector and or phlebotomist, does the blood draws out to that location.
Nice. Wow. Okay, so 2 hours have gone by, 3 hours have gone by. All this stuff has now been done. What next?
Next steps might be where we have to engage an accident reconstructionist. We may want to bring in someone with a drone to fly overhead to look at the area or something like that. The rapid remote investigation, you're still looking for posts, comments, and tweets, because a lot of people won't just post things up right then and there. They may post it a day later or 2 days later. So you're still monitoring all that information, because everybody has online media now. Every news station's got online media. Every radio station's got online media.
So you're not just monitoring social media platforms for witnesses. You're also monitoring the online media from local newspapers or TV stations or these kinds of things for what they might post.
Absolutely, yeah. Wow. A lot of times they'll fly a helicopter over to the location, and you get some great aerial views, and you can see where all the vehicles were parked at, where they're making the allegation that maybe your driver was parked out in the roadway or something like that off the side. He was out there or something. So you want to get all that information. You want to capture it. And what's really important about when people capture evidence also, it's got to be what they call authenticated, because you can take screenshots. You can take screenshots off Facebook or whatever you want to do, but a smart attorney on the other side is going to challenge you on it if it's not been authenticated. So all that evidence has to be authenticated. And a lot of agencies and different law firms, even the big ones, don't realize this till they get into the court of law, and then it's too late.
And then all the evidence supposed evidence gets thrown out.
Yes.
So I'll tell you, as a pretty experienced businessman who's done a lot of things, I did not know that. And so, here's a piece. If you don't hear anything else, whatever happens when your driver takes a picture at the site, anybody takes pictures at the site, you're going to have to be prepared to authenticate that type of thing. So be prepared for that. Do you even know what that means? What does authentication mean, Kevin?
Authentication basically means that when I am taking that picture, that's exactly what I'm seeing on that screen at the time, okay? Now, there's actually software out there that can authenticate it for you, and I could go into real deep as far as what it actually refers to.
We don't need to do that.
We don't need to go that far.
We just need to know it can be done.
But the really old school way to do it is if you had, like, say, a video camera, And you could put it up there with showing what they call the URL, which is like the website where you're on, and you could zoom back out and show, here's what I'm grabbing right now. That would be the old-fashioned way to be able to do it. It may pass for evidentiary purposes, but you always got to be aware of this, because you could have some great witness information, photographs, but if it's not captured properly, sharp attorney on the other side is going to challenge you on that.
Interesting.
Yep.
Wow. Awesome. Wow. So this investigation proceeds. How does the READI Response team, I'll just use that, all these different elements of this READI Response, how does this proceed over the life cycle of now it's a case? Let's say, if you wreck a truck, if it's a major accident and it says FedEx on the side, it's going to be a case, and so how does that go? How's all this come together as we move forward?
Sure. And like I say, if there is actually a case filed, then that would then take it to another level. I would give some recommendations to, the client. I would say, we probably want to do a background check on the opposing party, the one who's filing the claim against you. What is this person alleging? What type of injuries are they alleging? We do a lot of surveillance work. We've done a lot of surveillance work. Are they, they're claiming that they, can't function, they can't drive or anything like that. We may want to put boots on the ground to do surveillance. We may want to background that person to see what is their background as far as reputation for being a truthful and honest person. If you recall, several years ago down in New Orleans, there was a gang of people that were staging these accident scenes all the time.
Miami too. Miami's famous for it.
They were staging them. And what was going on is they were doing them in different parishes. Okay. So in the different parishes were not communicating between themselves about what was going on, because one time the person would be a defendant, he'd gotten injured, and the witness would be, one of the other players, and then they would switch roles in a different parish and stuff.
Yeah.
If they would have had like the READI Response team doing this, we could connect the dots so fast to say, wait a second, these are the same players on all these different things. I mean, it got so bad in New Orleans that their insurance rates went up. When you drove through New Orleans, your rates were raised as a trucking company because of what was happening there.
Oh, my.
So my old adage is this: knowledge is power.
Yeah.
The more information that you have, the better off you're going to be, when it comes, especially, you're into litigation now. That's a whole different thing where you need to get all the information you can. What happened? Where was it at? What they're alleging happened, is it true? Verify. Never assume. You need to verify.
So talk to me about, I'm a small trucking company. My guy had an accident. I've got READI Response, but let's say, worst case, someone actually on the other side passed away as a result of the accident. So obviously, there's going to be a court case, but between then, what happens to that small trucking company?
Well,
in your experience,
first of all, most small trucking companies usually are in a position they don't know what to do.
Right.
They are totally just, where do we go? Who do we call? I mean, there's totally in total mass confusion. And they really need to have a team that can say, okay, here's what you need to do. And almost like a checklist, you got to make sure that you've got all these different boxes checked as far as to start protecting yourself. What happened? Get the facts, get the circumstances. I mean, just because someone's making the allegation that this is how things were done doesn't mean it could be true. You want to verify. I mean,
or that it could even be proved.
Absolutely. I had a case several years ago where this was dealing with a police officer, and that our client had actually come across the line, allegedly hit and killed him. Okay. And so on all the circumstances of it all, everybody had already found our person guilty without even investigating anything. Now, they bring in an accident reconstructionist, right? Everything that reconstructionist determined to be positions and stuff like that, he got the wrong skid marks. So his interpretation was all based upon an assumption, which was not accurate. We went out and found the real information and found the actual locations, did a background on the officer, and found out more information about his abilities, and because he was a shorter in stature person, and he had a lot of heavy equipment and stuff around, and the reason he had parked where he parked at because there's bad cell reception. So we got the whole story, not just a piece of the story. That's why it's so important. I've always said, never assume you need to verify everything.
Yeah.
And that's where, like say, the small companies, they're really at wit's end right now because they don't have, like say myGroundForce that could offer all these different problem-solving solutions. Right now, they're just probably going on the internet and talking to their friends and family about what to do and how to do it. A lot of times, it could get worse for them than better.
So in your experience, if a small company had this happen, or any company, but we're just talking about smaller companies now, under 100 trucks, is the DOT going to send people to their location? Is the state going to send investigators to their offices? I'm sure FedEx is going to send people to their offices. How does that go when the investigation begins? What happens to the company itself during this investigation?
Oh, absolutely. You're going to have more people come knock on your door, from DOT, from FedEx, even the plaintiff's side will maybe try to find information out. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times they'll try to get it through subpoena process. Mm-hmm. Sometimes because we just don't realize what all gets posted out there on the internet about our companies. I always pose this question to companies, even small companies. Do you know what your social media presence says about you? Have you looked at it lately? What about your former employees? What do they say about you? How about your current employees? Because we post everything out there on the internet, and you want to know that stuff because those are the things that the other side is going to find about your company, saying, oh, you're all about fast, getting there quick instead of being safe.
Yeah.
Right? And we find that stuff.
What is this DOT investigator when he walks in the door? First of all, he's probably there the next day or a day after that. What's he looking for? He's
looking for everything, all your files on that driver. He wants to see, is everything accurate? Is it correct? The person had a background check. Does he even have a CDL? I mean, we say this and you think, oh, come on, he has had a CDL. No, you'll be surprised sometimes the people you think have something that they really don't.
They're going to come in and go through that driver's life cycle records, training records, everything.
Yes.
What else is he looking for?
They're going to look for the company profile also. How many crashes have you had? How many reported accidents have you had? What is your reputation, on these type of things? Are you doing mandated, type of, okay, we're doing training based upon this last crash. We've had everybody go through this new training and stuff like that. Are you actually following up and doing those things? They're going to look at all that stuff.
They look at how you manage cameras, how you manage hours of service. They look at all of that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Dash cams can be the best friend for, a client that's been charged with something, getting a litigation, but it can also be, it can flip on them too.
Yeah.
But if you're managing it properly, with John Stanley's group with Synergy Solutions and people like that, if you're managing it properly, then you're going to be able to show like, look, we were taking care of things. In other words, we saw a problem, we were trying to identify it and trying to correct it. I mean, we're all human. People make mistakes and things like that. But if you blatantly just disregard everything and just kind of stick your head in the sand, which I see a lot of times happens, that they hope it goes away and it just gets worse. So you need to, have a team for you that understands, here's what's getting ready to come at you. Get you prepared for it.
Wow.
But you've got a team on your side.
So this DOT guy, when he come in, isn't he going to look for maintenance records?
He's going to look for everything. Yes.
Well, I know everything means something to you, but it doesn't mean anything to one of these small guys. So we know training records. He's going to look at the company's atmosphere. How are they training people? How are they managing their safety programs, be it for drive cameras, hours of service, onboard training, recurrency training, CDL maintenance, compliance maintenance, all those things. If it's a real trucking company out running under their own DOT number, then how are they complying with all the motor carrier requirements, et cetera? But talk to us what this DOT investigator is going to look at on the truck.
Oh, he's going to go over that truck with a fine-tooth comb. I mean, and when I say that, I mean he's going to examine that truck from, top to bottom.
Well, the truck itself, if he can, but
Right.
if he can't, what's he looking for?
Well, they're going to get out there as soon as possible. Such as if it's a fatality, they're going to get out there as quick as possible on something like that. But he wants to look, brakes, tires. Tires is always a biggie. I mean, that's a huge one, and it seems like a lot of times that gets ignored, gets overlooked.
It's one of the reasons we emphasize that in myGroundForce, and we give you the ability to manage tire pressure and temperature. 95% of blowouts are related to tire pressure. And what I try to help people understand is when you have a blowout, you got to be extremely worried about what happened with that gator. That's what we call it when it comes screaming off of that tire, because if it hits the car behind you, you got worse problems. So that's an incentive for you to manage your tires in an effective manner. Look, it just needs to happen once. It's not an expensive thing to put on your truck to manage tire pressure, and you can eliminate blowouts. But what about a company's maintenance records? Is the DOT going to go through those?
Yes. They're going to look at the maintenance records. They're going to see, because it gives them a picture, if you will, a snapshot of what this company is all about. Are they really about safety? Are they really about protection? Are they really about having, safe, road safety vehicles on the roads? Are they really, looking at hey, we want to have a good product out there, and we're protecting not only our drivers, but, the community at large?
So in your experience, because this is a comprehensive exam, and it's impromptu. In other words, it wasn't planned 6 months in advance. 2 days ago it happened, and now I've got all this help. It's like they used to say in the Prohibition times, right? I'm the government, I'm here to help. Yeah, okay, it's the kind of help that you don't need. So in your experience, how many trucking companies are actually effectively prepared for these kinds of investigations? In other words, to have somebody come look at them like that.
If I'm going to guesstimate on that, especially the smaller operators, 100 or less, probably maybe 10%, maybe.
So 90% could not withstand such an investigation.
No.
The DOT, the opposing attorney side, they're going to find something in that company that's going to say, just caused it. Whether or not it did, they're going to find a few red herrings in there that's going to work against the company's driver or the company that had the accident.
Absolutely. One of the big ones that they use a lot of times is just the cell phone. Okay. One of the things that you should do if you've got a cell phone, your driver's got a cell phone, is you should collect that cell phone. Not necessarily you have to have it examined or anything, but preserve it. Because what happens a lot of time in these cases is they don't do anything with the cell phone. The driver down the road decides to get rid of it, trade it in or whatever, and the next thing you have is an argument coming about what they call spoliation. You knew there was something bad on that phone, and you got rid of that phone instead of just setting it aside, preserving it. Just set it aside, get you another phone. That is something that happens all the time.
Wow, that is great advice. I would have never thought of that. I didn't think of that. I mean, I've been through it. I didn't think of that. Man, I'm learning a ton here that I didn't do. I can tell you, I don't think I'm alone in that when it comes to this FedEx ecosystem. So, I have said many times in this business when and particularly as I've gotten into consulting and doing podcasts, et cetera, that I get asked a lot, Tim, how do you put a company together? How do you do these kinds of things? And what I say is, look, you have to organize your company around what is the worst case scenario. What could happen that presents the greatest threat to your company? If you're really doing a good job running a company, you're going to do a SWOT analysis. What is a SWOT analysis? What are your strengths, weaknesses, and what are your opportunities, and what are your threats? And one of the threats you have to assess in a small trucking company like a FedEx service provider is, what happens if I have an accident? And that is a threat to everything in your company. And what I have said time and time again, and I hope folks are listening, is FedEx is not here to protect you. People think, FedEx is going to handle that. No. FedEx is going to protect their own interests. Now, they have insurance commitments around what they will cover, but that's under the expectation that you are compliant with your role. And then, of course, you have to be compliant with the contract. I have seen FedEx investigators prove through hours of service information from the ELD that this driver was driving 67 miles an hour for 3 hours instead of 65 miles an hour. And therefore, he was 6 miles further down the road than he should have been if he was compliant with the contract. And therefore, FedEx doesn't cover the accident. And so when you talk about investigators showing up and going through training records and maintenance records and inspecting the truck and investigating how the company does business at large, in general, how they prepare drivers, choosing the right drivers, I mean, that's a level of sophistication and preparedness that my experience is very few service providers are prepared for. So having the opportunity to partner with someone like READI Response seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah. Like I say, I mean, you're getting the benefits of like what a major, trucking company would have. I mean, they've got a lot of these different basically groups, rush, response teams and things like that in place. But a lot of things that they don't have that we offer, that they don't do the geofencing. They don't do the rapid remote. One of the things I forgot to mention also, Tim, was our rapid AI that we're actually rolling out also, where right now we've got about 1,200 locations around the country that have got remote license plate reader cameras on billboards. Now, what's important about that is if you just had a crash at one of those locations, two things we can identify like rapidly. And when I mean rapidly, I'm talking like within 30 seconds rapidly. One, we can identify right before the crash, the license plates. Those are witnesses. Those are witnesses that were right there before the crash happened. And also, what was the weather like right at that time? Because a lot of times, that officer may not get out there for an hour or so.
Weather could change.
Exactly. You're identifying exactly what it was at that particular time.
Wow, Kevin, you guys have really done an outstanding job of looking at every piece of what I call the kill chain when it comes to an accident. You know, what we used to say in the Navy is an accident, there's a chain of events, and all of those events have to occur in the precise sequence in order to prevent an accident. And if one of those is not properly handled, then an accident could occur, right? So it could be anything, right? I saw a situation where an airplane crashed 6 months after it had been flying in the desert. And what they found is that a gasket inside a key element of the engine had been aged by its exposure to the desert air, but it took 6 months to fail. And so they started off blaming the pilots, but it took a long time for them to figure out through a very thorough investigation that we have a major problem on all our airplanes that went to the desert. So so you have to be prepared for these kinds of things is my point. And a very thorough investigation is key. So what I'm hearing for my customers, for our joint customers, since, READI Response is offered to the FedEx ecosystem exclusively through myGroundForce. So if you want to partner with Kevin, you need to be a myGroundForce customer. So here's what you're going to get. You're going to get a complete partnership to help you in the event of an accident. You're going to have someone from the very first moment, assuming your driver is not injured, as soon as that happens, he needs to check on himself, check on the other driver, make sure the police have been called, and then he needs to hit the button. And when he hit the button, he's going to set in motion all these elements of an accident investigation that are going to protect you. And what's going to happen from this is at the end of this process, or from the very beginning of the process, it's going to be a protection mechanism is being created for you that you've never had, right? Because right now, you're just standing in front of FedEx. They've got their lawyers. They've got the ARC. They've got all these other people. And they just say, okay, well, this is how it is. And you're just standing there with nothing to offer. Now you're going to have a complete professional accident investigation that includes on-site investigators, on-site attorneys, AI investigations of not only social media, but all the cars that were in the area at the time that might be professional witnesses that are getting talked to in person by the professional investigator. There's not one FedEx contractor that has that right now. I've never heard that from anybody. And so this is a service that doesn't exist right now in the FedEx ecosystem that will put you in a power position in the event this ever occurs. You need to have this kind of capability in your company. So in the guaranteed event that one of your folks has an accident, you can rest assured that you've done the best possible job of protecting yourself in the case in the event of some litigation. Now, your investigative package might be likely superior to what FedEx can put on the table, and that's not a position that we've been in. That's a power position as a service provider that we've just not been in before. So, Kevin, you have really taught me some things today that I didn't know, and I've talked to you many times. I've learned some more things today about what you bring to the table, and wow, this is like true bleeding edge, state-of-the-art service for small companies to get big company capability at a fractional price, right?
Absolutely.
And just so you know how this would work, there's a monthly fee and then there's a per incident fee. But I promise you the per incident fee is going to be far less than you could lose if you don't do it, right? Because look, FedEx is going to protect its own interests. They are not going to protect you, not because they hate you, but because that's not their job. You have responsibilities that are explicitly defined in the contract. And if you're not following even one of those, FedEx will just say, well, you didn't properly train your driver, or you didn't properly maintain that truck, or you are not properly adhering to the speed limit, or your hours of service weren't properly being done, or you weren't coaching drivers the way we told you to. And then they're going to remove their protection, potentially. Well, now you're protected, right? We've talked about in detail how to protect yourself in the event of an accident with a professional service that you can acquire at a fractional rate, right? That's what we do in Fusion, and that's what we do on the Taking Care of Business podcast. We bring things to you that no one else is bringing. Kevin, thanks so much for this conversation today. Wow. If I was still a contractor, I would be signing up before I got out of this chair. Outstanding. I hope this business is going great for you because you're bringing a service to the industry that we need. You know, the average trucking company in the United States, not just FedEx, but in the United States has 10 trucks. Everyone needs your service. They don't even know it. So we're going to scream loud and clear in this ecosystem that, look, you really need READI Response. So I'm blown away. Thanks again for being here. We really appreciate it. Join us for our next episode at Taking Care of Business Podcast. Y'all take care.